Now, this is the last session of the second day, and it's great to see the spirits are high, no one's tired, the room is full, all the tables are full. It's amazing. It's very, it's very encouraging for all of us in the sustainability domain to see this this interest in the subject and the interest in learning. Having said that, we're going to be talking about, last but definitely not the least, a very, very important topic about diversity. Yeah, independence and diversity. And we're looking at the boardroom because diversity is a very broad topic, as all of you would know, and we needed to come down to one aspect of diversity. And oftentimes, in a lot of industries, we've seen also in the study that we do every year that there would be diversity, but then how does that show up in the leadership is then another question altogether. So today's session, we would be talking about independence and diversity in the boardroom. I have a very interesting panel. We have Mr. Nishant Garg, who's the MD of Maiden Forgings. We have Mr. Vineet Harlalka, CFO and Company Secretary of Indian Energy Exchange. We have Mr. Dheeman Kadam, who's the co-founder of goEgoNetwork. And of course, we have Kamini Shah, Ms. Kamini Shah, who's the CFO of Birlasoft. Opening question to all of you. Why is diversity important in organizations? We know the business case of it, which is done to death. Let's keep aside the business case of it. Why, besides that, is diversity important in organizations? And maybe would you like to start first? Yeah.
Yeah. So we are on the lower end of this value chain where we are a startup. So we put both the hats where we are the strategic guys as well as the guys who are executing. Why diversity is important, especially at that level, is that you need to create role models, and that is very important. Like I see that this side of the table there were a lot of 20-30-year-olds, and for almost 2 days I've been attending the sessions. There was like one question or two questions, so that kind of drab is what we could not generate that kind of interest from these youngsters. So that is why it is very important that there will be female role models who can these 20-year-olds look up to and make sure that they are aspiring in that ways. And that is why in today's day and age, like where we got invested and then finally we got one director. But when we go out asking for independent directors to join our board, there is most of the times a big no. And then you have to like really pick and choose.
Yes.
So you need to have that.
I'm going to come to that second part of the question and the last question of mine. But the first piece, I think you raise a very important part of age diversity, right? And Kamini, do you have anything to say about that? Why is diversity?
I think it's extremely important because the first thing that comes to people's mind when you talk about diversity is gender, right? Because that's something we talk about in most organizations. And it's a very important aspect to it. You know, if I were to look at our own organization in Birlasoft, I think I would say almost 2/3 of our independent directors are actually women. So it's really played it's been very important for us because it's brought a very different perspective for us overall in terms of the kind of conversations that you have. I think they really push the boundaries in terms of innovation. They are diverse. You don't really need a homogeneous group to that extent. The other aspect of what I wanted to call out also is the fact that, you know, I think diversity is much more than that. You have a racial and ethnic diversity for global organizations. I can talk about my past organization where we had a lot of people, you know, who were probably from different parts of the organization, different parts of the world. Globally, they give you a perspective around that. In fact, in our current board, we have somebody who's from a startup who gives us a lot of view in terms of how do you build scalable businesses. So that's a different aspect to it. So I think, the more you have diverse groups of people, I think it challenges the management of the company to think of different ways in terms of how they can fine tune their strategy and how they can create their growth plan. And it really pushes the boundaries for them.
So
And I think that's the benefit that
Great.
comes
So
through it.
different perspectives, which leads to greater risk mitigation as well. Great. Mr.
I would,
Yes,
just a
Vineet.
moment. I'll like to add on what Kamini ji just said.
Yes.
See, I have been often asked, like, what are the biggest challenges you see for your organization? Okay, and I always say that I see globalization and digitalization as the biggest challenges. They are opportunities, but they are challenges as well.
Yes.
Because, like, post pandemic, everyone has seen that businesses are facing new kinds of challenges
Yes.
that were never seen before.
Yes.
If you have diversity in your organization as well as in your board members,
Yes.
so everyone has come from different walk of life. I will go beyond the age factor,
Yes.
the gender factor, and the different walks of life they are coming from. Like she said that one of the board members is from startup, so when they are there, every unique problem that is arising out of this globalization and digitalization
You're
can
able to
be
deal with it
catered.
better. Yes.
Yes, you have a better team to
Very
deal
good.
with it. If it's
So
a
that's an
diverse team.
excellent point. So,
Right.
if you have a diverse team, then you're able to deal with diverse problems as well as digitalization, because you have digital natives and then you have digital adopters. So, and then also globalization, because you have a diverse team from different regions, different countries. You're able to deal with international clients or internationalization of your organization much better. Great. Vineet, please, your thoughts on why is diversity important in organizing?
Diversity, I think maximum things all the other panelists had cover. With my experience and what I see, I'll just carry forward or continue what Kamini ma'am had said. Because in today's environment, business are getting very complex. And when you have a different people from different background, different knowledge, different kind of experience, they say in their board have one startup persons also. Because many complex problems need a multi-dimensional approach. So different people bring their different approach, different kind of analysis, and they grill the management also to think, rethink, be more innovative, come out with more out-of-box ideas. So these are things which, because board have to be very demanding sometimes, though they have to be sometimes accommodating also. But the diversity bring a lot of balance between the thought process and the way the problem need to be dealt. So this is how I look in the today complex, single mind cannot solve the complex problem. You need a different people, different mind, different way of looking at the problem.
So, great perspectives, and we all agree that diversity is really important. I'm going to ask you, talk about the problem. We looked at some data today, and across all the sectors, India's largest 200 companies, we're not even looking at like smaller companies, India's largest 200 companies, there was no sector which had, if you look at just gender diversity, there was no sector which had women on the board more than 25%. When we all agree in this panel, and probably everybody in this room, that diversity is so important, and we're not even looking at people with special abilities and minorities and all of that, but then just women, there is almost 50% human human population is women. Why do you think we still do not have more than 25% of the board as women? And Kamini, do you want to take that? Yeah.
I was just thinking about that because, a few years back, I'd given a talk around this. And, my last comment is that I hope the kind of focus that organizations are giving on diversity, I hope the board start thinking about it. See, I think one of the things that's happening is the fact that, I think there's a glass ceiling over there at a point of time. It is something that very few organizations were comfortable in terms of having women on their board, right? So I think they're realizing it. And thanks to, I think, SEBI and some of the regulations, they're actually enforcing it. So somewhere it started there. In a lot of instances, you've started having people being forced to have women directors. The second aspect is, one is in case the need of the organization. The second is the supply, right? Where's the supply, right? Because a lot of companies say that, where do I find highly accomplished women who are willing to come forward? It's not that they are not there, right? But some of them are not aware of the fact that they can actually play this role. And I think this is probably a situation where so much of awareness that's happening in the industry, I think 5-10 years down the line, you would probably see a much larger supply of people coming forward, being part of organizations. And the second aspect of it, which will be, is that they should be able to add a lot more value in their whole process and really talk through it. So my sense is we are going through that evolution at this point of time.
Great 2 points on regulation, and the second is supply. I'm going to chop that up and ask two of the panelists each, a little deeper. Vineet, from your perspective, from a CFO perspective, compliance perspective, how do you see the regulations? What kind of role do regulations play in improving the diversity at the?
Right now, the regulations are very limited, but I think regulations cannot solve this problem because as ma'am has said, there is a supply side issue because we face this challenge when we are looking for a few independent directors. So regulations, as in our earlier discussion, regulations have to supply kahan hai. The same thing, because the regulations can be enabled, but it's more of the mindset. The promoters or the board chairmen, they have to get more active on this to create that thought process among the board and to find or groom the people to reach that level. So I think regulations will come and go, but just making the regulation without availability of the right mind of people, because if you just put someone for the sake of diversity, but that person is not participating or not have those capabilities to deal with those complex issues on those kind of a challenges which the board need to address, then it will be a total futile exercise. We need to have a balance where the regulation have to be aligned with the supply side, and for looking at the forward, we need to groom the more due people to get that role.
Great. So it's regulations plus, right? You need regulations plus more. And Vishant, you talked about globalization, you talked about the need for younger people. So tell us a little bit more about the supply side. So younger generations coming in, what's stopping them from moving up to being potential board members?
I will, like he also said that he's running a startup and he found it difficult to onboard independent directors, and I'll tell you my personal example. We recently got listed like 3 months back. Okay. So luckily, like what all topics you were covering, I have been through them in recent times. So my board is just a small board with 5 people in it, and out of which 3 are independents. So first point is that, and out of them 2 are women, so 40% of the board is women. And till now, whatever board meetings we have had, every time the chairperson have been a woman. So so like it's not about what's stopping, whosoever is leading the organization in totality, the MD, the CEO, whatever, it depends on his vision, the founder's vision. Whether you want to run a Lala company who is working just for the person who is owning the business at the moment, or your vision is greater than yourself. You are building a company which will go for generations, something like Tata Group. So if your vision is beyond that, you should always take care of both the components, that is diversity on the boardroom as well as the independence of the directors to speak up.
I think that's very much in line with what we heard from Vineet as well. Yes, great. So what we're hearing in the panel is that, yes, there's regulation and then there's supply, but then regulations alone will not do it. And you definitely, and what we heard here from one of our young participants is that ultimately, it's about the organization, not just the owner, but the organization not wanting to be a Lala company in his words. But how do you be a progressive organization? And progressive means, essentially education means understanding different perspectives, So, your opinion, please, on this.
So my opinion is that this is a legacy problem, and it needs solving like now. Like you guys need to put out YouTube videos, if nothing more, to reach out to this generation. See how that supply will increase. See, there is a big black box that what happens in these board meetings. Like there is matters of discussion, there's matters of decision, matters for review, regulatory stuff. All this is a black box for most of the people out there. And then no matter how capable you are, you're always wondering that, will I actually add value there? And then you're just sitting back and letting life happen to you. Instead, like people who are on boards need to go out and put their experiences out there and make sure that these guys can see what actually happens in the boardroom and how important it is for them to participate, actually get excited about this. And
Thank
that is
you.
what it will, increasing supply means getting more people excited to do this. And that is how it will.
Dheeman, thank you so much. That's actually a great point because there is the seat and then there's the voice. So, getting the seat on the table, but then after that, having the voice and having your own voice, not having to be the echo chamber for the others who have just said. But would you have any comments on this, Vineet? Because, you've probably been in board meetings. And in these board meetings, what are your observations that the minority, I mean, not necessarily women or men or whatever, so the minority, just any comments on that, and do you feel like they are able to voice out, the ones who have voiced out, why do they do so, and if they haven't, then why not?
I came across board meetings where there was a very open discussions, very tough questions were asked to the management. Even being a CFO or grilled means literally means I don't know what word to use. And there were phases when we find the board were a bit complacent or a bit, we expected more from the board. So I think these things happen. So we can't put a definite parameter. But one thing I personally like to share, ki right now the independent directors, what I feel, ki except the few, they don't have any stake in the organizations. And the kind of remuneration or compensation being paid, so it's more of just tick mark kind of what of things that the value what they add. So there need to be a proper balance and the obligations defined from the board members, whether it's independent directors. I will talk because it's more on the independence and sustainable issue we are talking on the governance. Because right now, the challenge what we face, if we take a very professional directors or who are quite active, they are much more occupied in their own activities and business to spend time of the company. And if you take the people who are retired, then they are more or less done with their life. So they are just passing on the time to get connected with the people and all. So you need to balance a person who can have some interest, so who spend time to understand the business, who understand the solutions what the management is looking, what kind of expectation setting from the management need to be defined. So these are the few challenges what we face. So to single out the individuals I think will not be the right thing, because in each individual coming to that level in any company, capability wise, I don't put a question mark on any of the person. They are highly credible and have the capabilities. It's more of a thought process and the ownership of the role what they need to take.
So this is agnostic of where they come from, what they belong. For everybody, this is the challenge. But Kamini, do you want to? And I wanted to just add a little question there. That have you noticed in the boardroom somebody who's a minority, in whichever way, to be quieter than the others? Because I certainly, when I was 33 and I was the first time in the boardroom, I was intimidated. There were these all other were men. They were twice my age. Some of them thrice my age. And I wasn't speaking much, but would love to hear your.
So I just wanted to comment to what Vineet had said, right? Because there was a recent PwC study that was done, which said that almost half the board don't feel very comfortable enough to voice out a thought which is which is divergent from what the majority of the directors say, because it's not very comfortable to do that, right? So I think that's clearly it's a human trait to a large extent, right? In terms of the fact and to the environment that you create in the board meeting, I think will make a difference in terms of how much do you value diverse perspectives that come in. Right? Because to some extent, if you find that either the management or the promoter organization, which is a large part of our Indian companies, if they don't create an environment for the independent directors to voice it out, right, then you will find them that they will not be willing to come. But if you create an environment where, they are actually willing to listen to diverse perspectives, I think you will find them, talking about those. So in a lot of our committees, we have found that, the chairperson makes a very specific effort to actually include the feedback from the other members, and even some of the very quiet ones who they take a long time to come out, they actually come out and give their perspective. So I think it's a factor of the environment that you create. over there.
So that's the onus of the company secretary, the ones who are the CFOs, the leadership who are organizing the board meetings and the committees to make sure that it's a comfortable environment for not just diversity to be at the table, but diversity to speak up. I just want to go back to Dheeman, and we've moved now to talking about some of the best practices that how do you not just have diversity in the room but get them to speak. Can you provide some examples, one or more examples, and I will come back to you also on that, but then one or more examples where you've seen diversity in the boardroom, and how was that taken? How was that treated? How was that diversity treated? And if you can also tell us in a sentence or two that what was the advantage of that?
So one of the major differences which as a startup we saw, like personal example, is that the entire decorum of the room changes. It was 3 friends who started this startup, and that time it is more or less not very formal. Plus, you're not very sensitive to employee issues and all this because you're in that high growth kind of a mindset. And then as soon as you get diversity, there is this thought, one major thing of being safe. This is something where we got really sensitized towards it. And that makes quite a bit of a difference when you're attracting talent also, that that voice goes out. These employees at that level also then feel comfortable and are tomorrow's advocates of your company, that these guys are sensitive and make sure that you're comfortable working for them. It's not just high-paced growth which we are after. So one major thing which diversity brings is that experience which us youngsters didn't have, and didn't have even the time to think about, and to consider that it was one of the most important things for people to actually come and join you, wherein we are struggling for tech talent with a Birlasoft and a TCS. So what is it that you give? And these are the kind of messages where these employees are then advocating you, these customers are then advocating you, and that's something which I think a diverse board definitely brings in.
Great. Vineet, you had a comment to make, and then also if you could, with that comment that you wanted to make around with that, if you could answer the question also of an example of diversity, how that came about.
I just want to make the comment that is more for chairman. Chairman is very critical, the culture and the environment in the which board meeting happen. Once we used to have a very big board and very diverse board with a lot of PE investors and a lot of government representatives and all. So it's a chairman which ensure the participation from even the minority directors and others. So this is something is key for the board. And second, on the diversity, means I can't diverge much of the discussion, but yes, there had been few instances. There was one gentleman which quite knowledgeable, but he used to be quite on the board. So many times he just used to come, and we normally used to think he never participates in the meeting. But one time there was one key issue on the discussions were there, and there was a quite disagreement between the board members about that particular decision. And at that time, this gentleman I first time seen in speaking, and the way he articulated the challenge and the way he represented the challenge before all the board members, and that both the board members or both groups of board members were looking at the solution with different perspective and bring the another perspective on the table, and the solution was reached. So sometimes that minority of the small shareholder board members which is not speaking, but it's not that he's not capable. Sometimes they're not being inclined or something like that, or sometimes they feel these are very petty issues to get myself involved in that issue. So these are something which we need to value. We have to know the strength of each of the directors and how to utilize that particular strength from each individual.
So I think we're talking about something very interesting, that how do you engage the board members? So I think it's moved from whether we all agree that boards should be diverse. getting a seat on the board, even if, from diverse communities, but then to speak up, but then also for the organization to engage them so that they're able to pull out the best out of the diverse perspectives. Thank you so much. Kamini, would you like to share an example of diversity at the board?
See, one of the things that I've seen in an earlier organization, I won't mention the name, but when they were putting together the board, I think the management team and the chairperson actually decided in terms of what kind of a board do we want to create, right? What kind of experience do we want people to come? Because eventually, at the end of the day, independent directors largely have been homogeneous in most organizations, right? So this organization actually took a very concerted view to say that let's get people who are from, the new age technologies, because as an organization, we are going through transformation. And they actually went and identified people who could play that role in that board, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is that I think it's very important for the chairperson and the management team to really identify what are those diverse skill sets that we want to bring into our board, which actually will create a multiplier effect for us, right? And that's how you really go and sort diverse and independent boards, that to make it a lot more holistic, right? The second aspect to what Vineet says is that I think it's not always important, and I just want to mention that because we have one of our independent directors who doesn't talk at every board meeting, but she's so knowledgeable that at a point of time when there is a crisis, everybody looks at her automatically to say that, what do you bring to the table? How do we resolve the issue, right? So it's not necessary to have a voice just for the sake of voice, but I think the knowledge and the competency that you bring together and the chairperson knowing at the right time to bring in that perspective, I think would make boards a lot more healthier and beneficial from an organization, actually.
Great, thank you. Nishant, tell me if you've had experience with this, but then oftentimes the board members, the discussions are not just restricted to the board members, right? There is the famous boys club, or there is a certain group of people who actually are friends elsewhere, and when you come to a boardroom, those kind of relationships and friendships and places of meets are reflected in the independence of opinions, and that almost sways. These are some of the unspoken aspects of diversity rising to the top, the stuff that happens beyond the boardroom, beyond the offices. Any views on that, and how do you think that the younger generation could maybe cope with that, or diverse populations could cope with that?
I will tell you with my own example again.
Yes, okay, great.
So one of my independent director, she is towards she has her expertise area is marketing and business development and PR. Okay, and one of my independent director, his area of expertise is investments and share markets. Okay, so it's a small board. Okay, so I don't know at a bigger level how difficult it would be. Okay, but what I do is, it came to me automatically, like, I want something good for my organization to grow, to be progressive, right? So what I do is, whenever matters relating to their area of expertise comes in, I just give them a call, direct call, like, what's your opinion on this, right? So I think whenever board meetings are happening, they are automatically coming up with the ideas wherever their expertise can work, or wherever they have a suggestion. And similarly, like Vineet said, that the professional independent directors, they are so busy with their own lives that they are not giving that much time to read the organization, and but if a promoter or a founder is always in touch with them on a regular basis, I think they are meant to be bending towards the company. Yes. And they become more comfortable. So it's about creating the environment.
This is exactly. So this is for everybody in the room. These are some of the things which I think it's not spoken about much and not discussed much. That there's one thing which happens in the organization, and there's meritocracy. But for diversity to flourish and reach leadership, not just board members, but having senior positions within the organizations, the social inclusion, the acceptance in conversations, outside the organization is also very, very important, and that sometimes is a maker or breaker, in this. We have also a very diverse panel, and I want to take that up and ask the panelists a question that how difficult is independence and diversity, creating an independent and diverse board? How difficult is it for large companies and vis-a-vis small companies, different sectors, because certain sectors the supply might not be there of of expertise across different diversity. So if you would like to take up that question first, that what's the is it the same playing field across sectors and sizes?
I will like the challenges, like when we look for the independent directors at IEX being a regulated exchange, like NSE and BSE are regulated by the SEBI, IEX is regulated by the CRC. So when we look for any sector expert we want to have on the board as an independent director, we always have a challenge, because the sector expert will not be independent, because he will indirectly will be connected to some of the sector players, big players. And if you look for that, independence is very tough to get. So you have to if you look for the independent director, then you have to very well define the skill set. And so these are the few challenges what we face. And generally, if I look at the sector side, it was more specific to the IEX. But when you look at the overall board structure, the first thing is need to be key. What is the structure, or what kind of a skill sets the board need? That is something I think there's a first task where the many company falters. So the management also have to identify the key strength on the board, the areas where they need someone should bring that expertise or that guidance to them. And secondly, then who are the right set of the people with right set of mindset. And the third part is the important, the culture to make those people participate and give their views, and don't get driven by the management. So there should be a totally balance between the understanding of the business. So these are the three aspects, and where the maximum faults happen is identify the skill set which need on the board, because sometimes senior management team also don't look for the person who are going to put too tough questions to them. So these are something challenges which we feel.
Thank you. Dheeman?
Yeah, for us it's the most difficult, I think, and one of the major challenges, independence, obviously there is much more opportunity on that side of the table than this side of the table, because of the kind of pay package or sitting charges which you see. Apart from that, the diversity angle of it, the supply is a major issue, which we see that how do you get these people excited to come and join a infrastructure company, and especially on the EV side, which is one of the newer sectors. So then you have to really jot down and narrow down to maybe one person, and then go all out behind that person to join you. And then there is the COVID has done great in cutting short the boundaries. Otherwise, in a city like Pune, that is again more limiting the regional. So someone flying in and then just sitting for one session and then going out, that becomes even more difficult. So all that taken into consideration, I think what needs to happen is that there needs to be a lot more of mentoring from people in those positions, so that these people get excited, the youngsters especially, and don't feel afraid of joining into the boardrooms. And that is what will enable, especially startups like us who are climate tech or new age,
Yes.
deep tech. There is absolutely no requirement that you need to be entrenched into that subject. You need to have a clear mindset and thought process and certain responsibility as a board member, and that should be more than enough for you to be.
I really
be
liked
able
your
to-
point, what you talked about. And again, another thing which people don't talk about, that mentoring and training to be board members. That is something which is, I think, really missing in the conversations around this topic. But Kamini, please, your ideas.
One thing that is very clear is that when it's a larger organization and a very strong brand, it's a lot easier to get independent directors, right? Because to some extent, the brand name itself, and it's very prestigious to be associated with organizations around it. The other aspect to whatever Hemant added, I want to call out that, there are also a fair amount of regulatory obligations on independent directors, which is also a reality, right? To some extent, people would be a little cautious about wanting to be part of smaller organizations who do not have a history behind them. And that's the reason why they're a lot more cautious. I think in my mind, that's probably another additional point that could play a part in terms of where they would want to, be a part of.
So larger organizations do have it easier, and then certain sectors there's a supply problem, and then for different age groups, and so they need mentoring and some training, which is missing as well. But Vishant, your views on this? On is it a level playing field for different sectors, sizes of companies for having independent and diverse?
See, selection of an independent director, be it for a smaller company or for a bigger company who is a brand, it's the most crucial appointment, I would say. Right? Because they are acting on the strategic level of the company. If it's a bigger brand, let's say Birlasoft is there, or any big company, they have other risks while appointing an independent director from the unknown. So it's a very crucial selection for any company, be it for bigger companies or be it for small companies. Smaller companies face different challenges, like I faced, like he faced. So we face different kind of challenges. So what I have done is like, whenever I'm meeting people around, like maybe at this conference or in the future, whenever I'm finding a person who is knowledgeable and who can give me actually inputs for nice growth, so as and when we require, we should, I think, as a promoter, I can shortlist them and keep in mind, like, whenever I have to appoint next time, so I have these pool of people. It's very difficult to do it on a instant basis and select from random people, because they have confidential information of the company, so they require to be trustworthy also,
Thank you.
right?
Thank you. We have just a few minutes, 2 minutes left for questions. Any questions from the audience?
Hi, my name is Akhil and I head the ESG function for IDFC First Bank. And we are in the process of setting a diversity target within the organization. One very hard-hitting question I get asked, and I would like to pose to the larger audience as well and to the panel as well, is that does diversity targets impinge on meritocracy?
I've been part of organizations where we had diversity targets, right? I think one fundamental assumption is that it's a level playing field. If everything else being equal, right, then you give that opportunity out to probably your diversity candidate. But I think at no point of time, I think at least in the organizations I've worked for, they have said that it is one against the other. I don't think that's even a point of discussion. So that's how we should tell people. Everything else being the same, my preference would be for the diverse candidate, just to get in more different perspectives from an organization standpoint.
Absolutely.
And that makes it more difficult also to have somebody who merits it and has a diverse perspective. That is why this panel is here, because it's so difficult to do that.
It's very true,
Yes.
because the trade-offs are what is being, highlighted. So,
Exactly.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.